Yes, I'm Josh. I, on behalf of the apple growers and concerned climate scientists of the state of Michigan, and also apple enjoyers of the state of Michigan, I've been working with climate adaptation technologies, specifically wind machines. But before I get into what wind machines are and kind of that kind of thing, this is a headline from 2012, which was a notable year in the Michigan agriculture and fruit growing space, because the crops did not fare well in the spring of 2012. Late April, early May, temperatures really started to rise really rapidly, even in late March. And things warmed up. It started to blossom and then bloom, and then temperatures plummeted over a number of nights. I heard anywhere from 10 to 20 nights of low temperatures that are potentially damaging to crops. And that's 20 sleepless nights for Michigan farmers who are growing these apple crops. You laugh, but like they actually just don't sleep when this kind of thing happens. Just kind of, I'm not going to walk through this entire thing, but this shows the damaging temperatures of different stages, phenology stages of apple crops. And so when the tree is just starting to bloom, it's actually pretty resilient. But then you get down here, green tip, tight cluster, especially these later ones, first pink, full pink. And yeah, it's 29, 28 on a cool, but not even that notably cold spring night can be super damaging. And so in the event of a frost, we're talking about a radiative frost here, not an advective frost where things are blowing in, but it just starts to cool down slowly. And yeah, and it gets to those lower temperatures. If a farmer, a grower, apple grower, or other crop, but specifically apples are kind of what's most cost effective, has one of these frost fans or wind machines as they're called, they can turn it on, they can fire it up at night, and it'll blow warm air down kind of across anywhere from 9 to 12 acres of coverage. And it can provide up to 2 degrees on the higher end of an average 2 degrees Celsius of protection, and in perfect conditions up to like 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, but that's pretty rare. But when I think of 2 degrees, I don't think of much, but when I think about 2 degrees in terms of like a human body condition, that's the difference between normal functioning and a high fever, especially when you're talking about Celsius. So these are really interesting system to be thinking about. And so I looked at spatial combination of regional climate. This is on the west side of the state of Michigan. Specifically, there's a number of apple growing communities, but the west coast really, and I'll talk about some of the specific regions on the west side, but also microclimate played a really big role when I started to dig into this more. Just even the individual farm and elevation changes makes a big difference. Temporal scales, as I said, minutes to hours can make all the difference. And so you can fire this up, ahead of time, and you might be able to save a lot more of your crop than if you were to wait until the last minute possible and then start up your wind machine. And then the data I was working with, we're talking about I was working with daily data and monthly data, as well as, and then providing outlooks retroactive, but on data sets that were 4 years long to 100 years long. So the earliest data set started in the 1910s, but a lot of recent data sets are much more recent only. And then the wealth scale that Ricky talks about, the costs are actually pretty notable. One of these frost fans, that, like I said, 9 to 12 acres of coverage, it can run you $50,000 or more for a single machine. And so if you have a 100-acre plot, it's a lot of money. And then every time you fire it up, you're using propane mostly. There's some use diesel, but most of the growers use propane engines on their machines. And so that's every time you fire it up, it's going to cost you something. But from what I heard from growers, they would much rather spend a little bit on propane every week or so to get a little bit of protection than have another 2012 event when they lost everything. Because you're just waiting for that one event and then you can just lose your entire year's profit in a single night, which is crazy. So this semester, I continued to work with the model that I was working with last semester. There's an empirically derived model that I was basically handed in Fortran code, and I converted it to Python, and I've been making adjustments to it and making figures with it, and it's been pretty interesting, a lot of the findings that we've had, and I'll go into a little bit of that later. One of my favorite parts of this project has been able to meet with growers. I got to take a trip over to Hart, Michigan, which is near Ludington, and talk to 6 or 7 of the growers that have at least a couple of these wind machines on the farm and hear about their experiences. That was amazing. And then just hear about the economic significance of this. When you can lose, like I said, your entire profit in a single night, what does it look like to spend 50 grand to install one of these? What are the other options in insurance possibilities? And so from that meeting with the growers, they said it was totally worth it. They were all strong advocates of these wind machines. They said, I'm just waiting till I can get the principal to install another one, essentially, if they didn't have full coverage on their plots. I was able to visit Renhack Farms. This is a picture of one of the machines in the background, but I mean, these are huge operations here. And so the placement, they said, was one of the most critical parts of this. I talked about microclimate a little bit, and you can see a little bit in this picture, but the rolling hills of the farm and the general slope of the farm is really important. They said that the distributor, the retailers of these machines actually come out and do an analysis, and they can help you make decisions about that. But these growers know their farms better than anyone can tell them about their farm. And they said that if you imagine your farm flooded with water, and then it starts to slowly drain, the lowest parts are going to be the coldest parts. They're always going to be the coldest parts. And the highest parts are going to be the warmest. But then you start to talk about the wind effects, and you can't see in this picture, but Lake Michigan is right here, is what this horizon is. And so the winds coming off the lake, how does that play into it? Would you rather start protecting the lowest parts of your plot, or would you rather start with an area that's going to be potentially affected by wind? Is it worth it to place? So all these things, very important. They talked about the importance of auto start fans, those minutes to hours what it takes to drive around your property and start one of these things up makes a difference. They said, one of my favorite quotes was, auto start is not an excuse to hug your pillow at night, but it might save you a couple grand in the end, when you are able to get these running a little bit quicker and start it up. So and they talked about the quality of the product. I've been focusing a lot on the quantity of apples that you are able to grow, but they really emphasize the quality of the final product. And so in the beginning stages of development, I showed you kind of the blossoms. That's going to provide protection on the blossoms, but how these frost fans are going to be able to use to protect the quality of a small fruit as it's growing and protect, the skin sheen and the color of the apple. It's incredible. And also note, only 5% of this region that I went to has frost fans. I thought that was a small percentage, but there's a lot of potential for growth. So just some pictures from my visit. This is what these fans look like up close. They're really big, and this is that propane tank. They said they get between 2 and 3 nights of use out of a single tank of propane. So some of the notable findings. The first finding is that this 2 degrees of protection here provides a majority of your crop will be protected year after year if you can get to that 2 degrees threshold. In talking to growers, it's closer to 1 degree, between 0.5 degree and 1.5 degrees seems like reasonable given windy conditions and whatnot. But if you can get somewhere in that 1 to 2 degrees, you're feeling pretty good about yourself, and you're feeling pretty good about that investment that you made. The second thing, I talked about regional climate and the importance of microclimate. Of note is this spatial variability. So this is from 2 different regions in the area. One of them is the Northwest region, so kind of Leelanau County area, up in the Pinky of Michigan, and then West Central, south of that, Oceana County, Ludington, Hart area. So this is the one that I visited, and this one just has a lot more data. But this is pretty wild when you look at this. This is mid-1960s, but 6 injury days versus 0 injury days. That's a big difference in the decision making, and do you want to purchase one of these? Again, here, later on, mid-2010s, 3 injury days to 1 injury day. Thinking about the difference here, this is the same year approximately, and these are rolling means, so it's a little bit buffered by that. But this is 5 injury days in Northwest Michigan, and the highest being 3 injury days in West Central. So that's a really interesting finding, that it's hard to just make a blanket statement about the research. And then this is the recent data, not a rolling mean, but yeah, you can see most recent data, not average at all in a single region, 12 injury days versus none. And the severity of these injuries is different. This could be a 0.5% injury, or it could be 90% injury. This is but just looking at that, it's pretty notable. And I talked about this already, but kind of the microclimate plays a major role in that spatial variability. This is one of the recent things that I've been looking at. This is super annoying. Date of earliest injury. So when I was starting this project, I was told that likely the injury would be getting earlier in the season. As climate warms up earlier, we expect frost events to continue to be around the same time. We expect the injuries to be getting earlier in the season. The date of the earliest injury, though, I've found consistent across the entire west side of Michigan, besides a few anomalies that are not in really fruit growing areas, is they're staying consistent or potentially even getting later in the year. I've been talking to Jeff, who's been working with me on this project really closely, and he said, we're gonna have to think about this, and I don't have a great answer for why that's happening. But super interesting finding to me. One of them could be the phenology and potentially how the crop is progressing, and why that's happening. It's a combination. This is the greatest part about this project, I think, is the combination, the application of the biology complexity and the climate complexity. Late April to end of May is the most common time of year for the earliest damage to occur. So this is when growers are going to really have to be on their toes and getting those wind machines fired up. Not an astounding finding, but worth noting. Consistency across all the regions in that. Phenological stage, it's it's not in the earliest stages when the temperatures are coldest, and it's not in the late stages when it's the most vulnerable. It's a mixture of both of them. I found that really interesting as well. Status of the project. I don't have a ton of weaknesses and threats right now, which is encouraging. But yeah, strengths, opportunities. There's a lot more to be done, I think. So yeah, which is a great thing because I'm going to be continuing working on this project over the summer. I'm going to be continuing on with Glisa and with Jeff as we continue to try to make progress on this, and then set it up for potentially another student to come in and take over. But yeah, these are some of the questions that I'm going to be looking at soon, and then future direction. There's more work to be done. In that economic analysis, there's an agroeconomist at MSU who I've been kind of working with. Basically, I've been giving him numbers and he's been running some economic models. But then we want to make this palatable. Like those figures are useful for a class like this where I'm speaking to peers, but when I'm talking to growers who have varying levels of education and varying levels of interest in statistics, a lot of them have minimal interest in statistics, but they're interested in their profit and what that's going to look like. So making it palatable, and then I'll be continuing this work in the summertime. And yeah, it's been a really interesting project, challenging in ways, but yeah, I think that the system was pretty well defined from the beginning, and that let me kind of just run with it. Jeff has been super helpful in this process. Ricky in setting up this whole situation and taking my interests into account. Again, Matt Gammons, agroeconomist, and then Emily, I don't know her last name, but from the MSU Extension office in Oceana County. She was great. She fed us well. And also Dale Renhack, he let us tour his farm. And all of the growers were super generous with their time. So I wanted to, shout them out. But yeah, I'll take any questions.
Yeah. Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
Got apple?
I'm hungry for apples.
I actually had a series. Well, I just kind of thinking more about this, like the translation of this kind of project into like real world impacts and like what it might look like to say, like what parts of this you might be able to take into, even without like a formal, like, you know, economic model or calculation, but like what parts of this you might be able to take and say, hey, this could help with your decision making. This could be, you know, impactful in like your cost benefit or in your location or placement.
Mm-hmm. I would say that my recommendation in my experience with talking to the growers was, from what they said, they recommended, if you care about the quality of your product, start investing in these. They said that insurance is not worth it. It's barely going to cover the cost of buying the insurance. It's not going to be worth it if you care about the quality. So get one of these machines if you don't want to just send all of your product to be processed. So processing is an option if your quality kind of starts to go down the hill.
Yeah, and my follow-up question on that is just kind of like, how do you quantify, or have you thought about like how to quantify like the impact of temperature on quality as something that you could do like a statistical or an economic analysis on, like in context of the project? Or is that something that's just like,
it's a really hard problem.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things, including the climate system, but also disease and pest and things like that. We've been thinking about it. So nothing concrete right now, but that's part of the future direction for sure.
I have a question, just like, I guess like maybe not logistically, but so like how do these work? Like, do they straight up like heat the crops? And if that's the case, like, does a farmer just say like, oh, okay, checking the forecast tonight, it's gonna be like whatever, 25, so like probably gotta power it up for like the whole night? Or how exactly does that work?
Yeah, so if there's an inversion, you get colder temperatures near the ground, closer to the apples, and then like warmer temperatures above. And it's like a mixing mechanism that you're looking at. And so the farmers all have different kind of strategies on how they go about it. But a lot of them they are watching the weather really closely. And some of them have weather stations on their farms or near their farms that they're watching. But they basically say if the conditions are setting up for an inversion, and the temperatures are going to drop to a certain temperature given the phenological stage of the crop, they're gonna fire it up. And so some of them will do it preemptive, some of them will do it less preemptive and just wait for the auto start to kick on. The auto start costs more money, which is why some of them don't have it, and it's a little bit newer technology. But yeah, then it mixes and just kind of blows the warm air down, and it can provide the protection to the crops. Yeah, it's a little bit abstract. I kind
Oh,
of get
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
I have one more question then. Is there any scenario in which the temperature being higher than it's expected to be for that part in the crop's life cycle could be damaging? Or would that like only be a good thing?
Wait, can you?
Yeah,
say that
please.
again?
Is there any like situation in which the temperature being higher than it's supposed to be for that phase in the crop's like life would be damaging? Or only if it's like this back and forth in temperature?
Pretty much talking about frost and kind of all these things, no, not really. You can just start talking about drought conditions and what that's, temperature plays a role in that. But warmer days and warm nights allow the crops to just like start growing. And so, yeah.
I don't know if you can foresee into the future, but do you think that there's gonna be ever a severe event like 2012 again? Or how
Yeah.
the apple crop this year is gonna do?
No, I mean, earlier this week, last weekend, you started to see that warming up, and then a hard freeze happened. And this weekend, we started to get a warming, and then today, cooler temperatures. And so I was feeling for the growers in those days more than I ever have before. And I talked to Jeff on Tuesday morning. He said, yeah, they're a little bit nervous. They don't know the exact impacts until a little bit later on in the season. But I think that one of the more certain things about the climate change scenario is that variability will increase, and temperature extremes will increase. And so I would say yes, they will likely be concerning into the future.
I had one quick question, which is, has crop insurance changed at all as damage has become much more frequent so that it's less economically viable for farmers? Or has it always just been a really bad deal?
Yeah, so it depends on the crop you're growing actually a lot. I don't know if I should say this on the record, but it sounded like from their experience, corn farming, you plant the crop and then you hope that a damage event happens so that you can cash in on the insurance.
That's what I heard about, so I was wondering about.
So I've heard that that's with corn growing. That's not the case for apples. You want to provide a high quality crop that can go to market and be sold as like this beautiful Michigan apple. And insurance might cover the costs of your planting so that you don't, so that you maybe break even. But they were saying, almost all of them were saying like, I don't even buy insurance anymore. I would rather lease one of these for almost the same cost of insurance and provide a high quality crop with the potential of profiting off of it. So
Makes sense. Yeah.
There's a lot of economics of the credit union and the what your property value is, and it's pretty complex.
Yeah, I have an anecdotal observation that the two groups of people that have no scientific background but know the most about weather and oceanography are, number one, surfers.
That's a fact.
Great detail about storms, wind, waves, tides, and farmers. That they might not know all about the microphysical processes, but man, they could talk to you about weather and inversions and they'll have the weather channel going the whole
Oh, yeah.
time.
Yeah, I think one of the other takeaways from this project is that farming is really hard. And farmers are super smart, which is not a common stereotype that they are given, so
All the farmers I've always known are really small business owners,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
they're looking for an edge. Let's open it up to Ricky. Do you have any comments or questions, Ricky?
Again, really interesting, really good. So I'll limit myself to one question, which is relative to other threats or risks that farmers face, whether from climate or not. How big is this particular threat? You know, the frost threat, or are things such as you know, new pests because the winters aren't as cold or something more of a threat? Do you have any idea?
I don't have a great idea, but my intuition is that this is a pretty big threat. With pests, you can spray pesticides and there's an ongoing conversation about that, especially, I mean, the MSU Extension Office does a great job with their pest forecasting and their weekly updates. Jeff does a great job, but I would say that as far as events that can destroy your entire year's profits in a single night, this is up there with a pretty high threat to growers.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
Thank you. By the way, I have a hypothesis on why things are getting later rather than earlier.
All right, well, let's talk about that some other time.
We will.
I mean, I'll get to meet with you more on this, I assume, so
Yes.
great.
I'll ask you guys to postpone that discussion.
Yes,
But
yes.
let us know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Lauren, did you have last question?
Sorry, I'll be so quick. With like that in mind, that like things will only get more and more variable, is there any concern or like a world in which apple growing in this state just becomes like not feasible if it gets to be higher and higher swings? Or will it just be like these things that need to go up to like 4 degrees or whatever it is versus like the 1.2 degrees now?
Probably yes, it's possible to get to that place. I don't think we're close to that right now. Michigan is one of the top apple producing states in the country, behind Washington and New York. But I don't think we're close to that. I think the type of apple that farmers choose to grow will continue to change and always does, based on the market demands and things like that. But you might need to start growing more hardy, temperature resilient apple types than the beautiful Honeycrisp or Sweet Tango is one of the up and coming Cosmic Crisp. If you're interested in the future of apples in Michigan, those are the two to keep an eye out for. But yeah, the temperature resilience is something that farmers have to take into account when they're talking about profitability and what's going to get the most at market. So yeah.